Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LiftAffect podcast. I am your host, Matt McNeil, founder, clinical director, and director of human performance at LiftAffect, where we assist professional pilots with maintaining better mental health and optimizing their mental skills. The goal of this podcast is simple: to help pilots and other high liability professionals and disciplines come out of the shadows to discover how we can live better lives personally and professionally. Join us each episode as we discuss various topics ranging from mental health, mental skills and performance, to business, entrepreneurship, and a few other surprises along the way.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of LiftAffect podcast. I'm your host, Karl Keller, along with my highly motivated and just strikingly handsome Matt McNeil. How you doing, buddy?
You're a liar. And
which part? Motivation
so
or the looks?
You're so full. Both.
Oh, that hurts.
Well, motivated. I'm motivated.
Yeah.
Sure. Looks? Not so much. Not so
this,
much.
You say those kind of things and it's gonna... I'm
you're not a liar. You're a good BSer on that one, man.
Yeah. Oh, that hurts.
I realized in our little pre-show chat, I didn't ask you how you were, because that's what kind of jerk I am. How the hell are you, man? What's going on? I covered my drama.
How
have you been
do I answer that
this week? What's been going on?
I'm doing my son's girlfriend is over from London, so we've been running her around a little bit, and I'm doing the Mr. Mom thing since mom's at work, my wife's at work, and the kids are doing their thing. It's just that normal weekly chaos that just ensues. Our listeners would be very, very bored with my life, or either that, if I did tell them, they'd probably go, "You know what? My life isn't so bad. I like mine." So, maybe I should, but nah. Hey,
what do we got
in the pre?
Yeah.
Well, we were
today?
talking about something today, and this is a kind of a continuation of something that we were talking about before. As you could tell, I've already dropped a hint on what the word of the day is a couple times. Yeah, I know.
You're
We're
sneaky.
gonna,
I didn't even. That's how bright I am. I'm like, no clue. I'm like, what were we talking about?
That's
great.
So you were talking about motivation, and I figured I would lob that one over to you, and just you were talking about the motivation equation, and I thought that'd be a really good thing to follow up on. So I'm just gonna. You had some ideas, and I'm just gonna kind of have you have the floor, and
So we're
just kind of riff.
Just to provide a little context, last week we talked about motivation and commitment, and we got some questions about that over the course of the week. And I was just kind of talking to you in our pre-show. I was like, I got some interesting questions about motivation, and I think people were looking for maybe a little more deep dive into that. I covered the surface, maybe the first 5 feet down. But it's a 10-foot, just a 25-foot pool. Maybe we could go a little deeper into motivation. So there's a researcher, he's a psychologist, his name is Piers Steele, and he has done some of the most groundbreaking work on procrastination. And he basically won the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in psychology with his research and his discoveries. And so he came up with this formula that is really groundbreaking. And I've applied it with clients, and I've applied it on myself, and I've explored it, and I've really researched where this comes from and how it came about. So it's called the procrastination equation. And this is sort of a nod to Brian Johnson, who's a coach, who kind of flipped that on its head and said, well, heck, this isn't the procrastination equation. This is the motivation equation. And so this is a tip to Brian. Thank you, Brian. It's brilliant. But the procrastination equation is, okay, so here it is. I'm doing this over audio. So I can't write it out, but just write this down if you can, or just hold this in your mind. But it's M equals V times E divided by I times D. Okay? M equals V times E divided by parenthesis I times D. M is motivation. So we're trying to figure out what is motivation? What is the breakdown of motivation? So there's a numerator and there's a denominator. And so the goal is, obviously, we want motivation to be high. Or I guess you could reverse it and say, I want to make some low motivation. And so you could say, this is how we're going to create low motivation. But the idea is you want motivation to be high. So the higher the numerator and the lower the denominator, the higher result you're going to get, right? Makes sense? Basic mathematics, right?
It's like division.
Right? Yep. Like division. Want a super high numerator, super low denominator. So the numerator is V times E. Well, V stands for value, and E stands for expectancy. So let's break that down for a minute. Let's get into that. Value is achieving and sustaining motivation. It hinges on elevating the value of what you're aiming for, which is what we talked about last week a little bit, right? You're like, why are we doing this? Yeah. What is the point of this? So to maintain motivation, it's really vital to regain clarity on your core value of what truly matters to you. Talk to me, Karl. Break that down for a second. Like, what value? Where do you determine value? I mean, I think we start with core value. I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, but I think it almost always comes down to core at some level.
I would ask this question, and this may be splitting hairs, but we talk about values, our values. Yeah. And like you say, core values.
Yeah.
My question in this equation would be, when you talk about value, are we talking about values or the value of the issue or item or subject in question? So those could be two different things.
Well, that could be too. That's a great question. I think since we're talking about motivation, your motivation,
is it my motivation on a specific issue?
Okay, so
or
let's
motivation
say
on my core value.
Right.
Issues?
Let's say. Oh, we should probably come up with an example. Let's say the value is to drive, like, you want to drive revenue up. Okay. Drive revenue up. This is just a basic business example. We could use a personal life example too. Like, I want to paint my house. Okay. Or I want to build the shed in the backyard, but I can't seem to get my butt up off the couch to do this. Two examples. Well, we're talking about your involvement in making that happen. So now there is a value of revenue. Revenue is value. It's a number, right? The higher the number, it's considered the higher the value. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have the tax man. So sometimes there's some, but right? Sometimes you got to drive it down, right? That's why you got to have some pretty good expenses in there. Yeah, right. But it's like, okay, so that in and of itself is fine. That stands independent. But in terms of your desire to push that, well, what motivates you? Is it you're going to get a bonus? Is it allows the company to flourish, and then that's who you are employed by, or it's your company? But if you don't have a lot of motive, if that's not a value to you, which is always like kind of, I'm not even going to go into there about something that happens in aviation where it's like, it gets very contentious with labor management, and then it's like, okay, we're going to start taxing really slow, and we're going to start, burning up the gas and really kind of driving the revenue down. Well, then clearly, like the profitability of the company, you have lost. That's lost value to you. So I think let's stay with the person. Let's stay with the psychology of the person in here. So I think your motivate. It's got to be important to you, or it's not going to matter.
And in this case, I almost equate V with a different I, which is the importance of that, of what it is. How important is it for me because that motivation could be driven higher. If it's not important, there may not be much of a motivation. So that's why I say the value is a little bit different to me based on how you're outlining this equation. So in that regards, I think that V is critical.
It's critical.
Without that, like you say, if that V is small, if that value importance is low on your priority list,
right?
You're already behind the power curve. You're probably not gonna. Your motivation probably dies.
It's going to be low if it's not. And it just comes down to that fundamental thing. If it's not important to you, I don't care how much pump up you get, or how many people tell you, or how much you try to convince yourself that that this is important to you. If it just deep down is not important to you, you're going to be lower on the motivation spectrum. Okay, so that's the value piece. Now,
so to me, value is almost a given.
It's a given.
To be motivated, that's got to be a high.
Right.
That's got to be something important.
That's right.
So to me, I'll leave that one is kind of an easy one to.
It's an easy one to unpack. It comes down to that. Why do you care? Right?
Yeah.
Why is this important to you? So that's the value. Now, V times E. E is expectancy. What are your expectations of achieving this? Now, it's great to have goals, and lofty goals, and we're going to have our big, juicy, hairy, goal that we're going to try to achieve, but it has to be grounded in reality. I mean,
yes,
look,
it does.
I love, I love guys that can slam dunk in the NBA. I'm not going to be a professional basketball player. Right? I might be motivated, like, man, I want to play. I want to do it. I love playing I don't like playing basketball, but just using it. But I can't. I'm not going to dunk. I'm not going to go do dunks in a major league game. That's not realistic.
I am the true definition of white men can't jump.
Right. Right. Exactly. So expectancy represents what you realistically anticipate achieving. This expectation must be feasible.
Mm-hmm.
Can be lofty. I mean, it can be like shoot for the moon, but if it's totally diluted and delusional, which is why, like, sometimes, like, some of these rah-rah, company, we're going to be the best. And it's just kind of like nonsense. It's
look at the Independence Air. How they were rah-rah, we're going to remember that big meeting they had where they were going to say, hey, we're going to grind United into the ground. That was and everybody was all excited and we're going to buck the odds. That wasn't grounded in reality. No. And unfortunately they paid a huge price for it.
Right.
But I would say on expectancy, what's really important is that you look yourself in the mirror and your prior experiences should be something that you look at and go, in the past, have I had a tendency to estimate what I expect something to occur? Have I met my expectations, or did I shoot too low? Because if you have a history of always, it's good to be optimistic, but if you set yourself up for failure because you're constantly overestimating what you think you can do or what the outcome will be, then you kind of need to look at yourself in the mirror and go, whatever my expectations here, I need to temper them a little bit, or I need to up my game because people have a tendency when you hit whatever your expectations are, you kind of plateau. Most people don't drive through and go, let me see if I can exceed it. They kind of go, I met it. I'm happy. I've met it. So to me, that expectancy is really important to look at yourself and go, what kind of person am I? And what has my experience been when I've done stuff? Because you can create an artificially high V times E.
You can, and I think this is
overestimating things, or an artificially low.
Right. Well, we talk about in V1, we unpack willpower and then habits to get there, right? And so part of expectancy is being able to envision the future self. You have to really, do I really envision myself slam dunking in an NBA game? No, that's absurd. Like, I could deludedly dream about that, but when I really sit down to envision my future self, I have to be able to see that this is possible, because the willpower, which is what you need to drive through until you can create the habits and the algorithms, which, if you want to learn that, come to V1. I'm not going to talk about it here. It's too much. But you've got to be able to have a future vision of yourself to be able to expect this is realistic. So you need it's got to be valued, and you have to multiply that times the expectancy. That's your numerator. Get that really, really high. It's got to be really high.
That's the top number.
That's the top number. Now, that's weird. So I thought I heard. Oh, that's the dog barking upstairs. Yeah. Okay. Now let's cover the denominator, which we want to get really low. Well, the I stands for impulsivity. So scientifically speaking, impulsivity is the primary factor that erodes and eventually erases motivation. So think about this. If my willpower to not eat the donut, because I love donuts, but they're not healthy, don't want to go to the bakery and, buy a bag of donuts. If I can't see a future vision of myself of, well, what's that going to look like 5 minutes from now if I buy the donuts, or 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 years if I do that? If I can't see that, then the impulsivity of buying them will overrule that. So impulsivity erodes and erases motivation almost faster than anything else will. So you have to curb distractions. It's essential to decrease impulsivity. So another one, right? Digital distraction. Especially like online activities tend to be a very top culprit in terms of impulsivity. It's like, I just got to check Facebook real quick. Let me just check my email, something real quick. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Impulsivity is just terrible. So identifying your personal source of distraction is the most important thing you can do in terms of being able to identify what's your impulsivity sort of, kryptonite, if you will. Impulsivity times delay. Scientific findings indicate that prolonged delays have a very detrimental effect on motivation. The longer you postpone, the more your motivation just starts to splinter off.
The bigger the mountain becomes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can attest to that.
Right. I'll do it later.
Yep.
Give me a second. Just 1 second. That's delay. These are the simple little delays that we do constantly that are really powerful. It's not some deep, ingrained delay. No, it's the just give me a second. I'll take care of it later. I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, I'm not really feeling it today. That's the delay.
Yeah. I wouldn't use the word powerful. I'd use the word destructive.
It's totally destructive. Yeah.
It's very destructive, and it's insidious.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like it's at that moment that you're delaying, that you're stiff arming it, so to speak.
That's right.
But it definitely is one of those things that all of a sudden you look back and go, God, I meant to do that a week ago or whatever the period was. Yeah. It is very destructive.
It's destructive. And so how do you eliminate the delay piece? Well, you recognize it. And you have to, I think you break tasks down into micro steps versus I got to build the shed or I got to increase revenue by $1 million or whatever. I mean, like, that's sort of silly. Well, what are start with at the end and work backward of what needs to happen to be able to trace the many, many micro steps to being able to do it. And then you start with that step one.
Yep. The danger is that you can reach the point where it's so overwhelming going, how do I eat the elephant? Yeah. It's so overwhelming that I don't even start because I can't, I'm never going to do this. Like you say, they got to be incremental, but you can't rest on your laurels when you get those incremental gains. You have to go, okay, I've accomplished that one. What's the next one? Because if you don't, again, you'll plateau and go, oh, I got it done. I'm good.
Yeah.
So but you're right. It's if you don't do that and break it down, even if it's in major muscle groups, you got to, very rarely is something accomplished or achievable all at once. There are very few things, making your bed is something that can be achieved all at once. Yeah. But like you say, to increase revenue by X is not something that happens instantaneously.
No. It's like you said, do a little, a lot, don't do a lot, a little. Yep. That's part of that is like really chunk things down into micro steps. It's much easier to, it's eat the elephant one bite at a time kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so
And
I
like you
think,
said about the delay, I just wanted to throw one last thing on
yeah,
the delay. We've talked about this before. Just like our podcast is the example of 3, 2, 1, go. Just get up and start moving, because you've said something, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. So sometimes just getting up, or just putting the pen to paper, or whatever the issue is, just starting it sometimes is all that impetus that you need to get it going. So,
yes.
use the 3, 2, 1, go, and just go, you know what? By God, I'm going to do it right now. Not in 5 seconds, not in 5 minutes, but now.
I think that's a key piece for the delay part of that equation.
Yep.
Is just break it down. 3, 2, 1, go is great for the delay, but you got to start with your value.
Yep.
Why do you care about this? Why does it matter to you on a deep level? It shouldn't just be a goal, and there's a difference between goals and values. We've touched on that. I think of value as the compass heading, and goals are the cities that you hit when you're heading in that direction, the mile markers. You got to know the direction has to make sense, or all of the little mile markers, they're just going to be, notches, and they won't mean much to you. So it's got to be valuable. You multiply that times the expectancy of, like, I can actually achieve this. And I love, sort of the impossible goals, but not to the point where you're like, that's kind of delusional. And then that will erode that numerator. Then figure out what your impulsivity is. What's your kryptonite? Mine is digital addiction. And then multiply that times the delay. This is the essence of being able to increase your motivation. This equations, it illuminates this capacity, like for the interconnectedness of influence on ourself. You have to be able to influence yourself in a positive way. And so by just grasping the interplay of value and expectancy and impulsivity and delay, you can start to strategize effectively ways of combating the procrastination that honestly, like, derails people. It stops people from being able to flourish and bring something of value, and then it'll boost your drive to actually achieve what you set yourself out to.
Procrastination has such, I can't even quantify the impact it has on your mental well-being. It's truly, it erodes, because you get this, you start to get in this circular descending spiral of, it's depressing, because that the
really
object isn't the event, the issue is not going away. It's not getting better. And sometimes it may be getting worse. And it's there. It's on your mind. It's, depending on what the issue is. And it can be procrastination. It's almost like somebody who drinks and gets drunk to forget about it. The problem is, in the morning when you sober up, it's still there. It's
destructive.
So that's procrastination.
Do you have anything you can recall? I can remember one thing. One of these I have a couple different master's degrees, and there was one particular one that I did where I was procrastinating on my thesis project, just like finding excuse after excuse of why I could not start it or get it, and it was kind of this open thing, right? You just register for it's the last thing, you got to do your thesis. And I was like just pushing it off. And it was making me sick. I was physically ill not because of the work that needed to be done, but because I wasn't doing the work. And my motivation, I lost touch with why I cared about the project. I lost touch with why I cared about finishing the degree. I had lost that. So I had to rediscover some of that to be able to get it done. But it was really destructive for me. I was like a different person, and I was grumpy, and my wife was like, what is wrong with, what's the problem? And it's just like, it's kind of victimizing myself.
I can give you an example in my life with my son. Incredibly intelligent, always put things off to the last minute, procrastinated, and tried to, do the cram session the night before. And he said, I work good under pressure. And I'm going, but invariably, the grade he could have gotten wasn't as good as what he got, or would have been better than what he got, because he didn't have the time to put the level of detail and the research and all the granularity in it that it really needed. And what ended up happening is, down the road, when it came time, there was an institution that he wanted to go to after he graduated, and he couldn't go because his grades had been affected. And then I think only then did he realize that he kind of caused a lot of that problem. And then he took a course. He was a volunteer firefighter, became a paramedic. He took the paramedic course, and I saw such a change. He studied hard. He did it proactively, got things done before the due date, and he felt better. He did better. He's really good at what he does now. And it was amazing to see the difference between those two, from the same individual, realizing that, first of all, he wanted to be a paramedic. That was important, value high. The expectancy, he had realistic expectations for what he was doing. His impulsivity, it was lower. He didn't have the distractions. And basically, he didn't procrastinate. So he bettered every one of the ones that he needed to create a higher level of motivation, because he realized that if you keep doing the same things you've done, don't expect something different. And that was a great example of how you can positively impact your motivation by changing those things.
Yeah.
And it was a huge difference.
Yep. It's a good example, man. It's a good example. So in the grand scheme of things, can I leave us with this one final thought here?
Absolutely.
All right.
No, this is my show. No.
Well, the grand scheme, though, I just kind of think, I think we covered this thing. I don't want to get too much more into it. I think we got it. But here's my thoughts on this. Just kind of listening to you talk about your son and what kind of comes up for me. The only tangible moment is the present. The past and the future, they elude our grasp. All that's certain is this very instant. So, cease longing for a future moment to define you. And just, there are no commonplace moments. The essence of your character reflects in all that you do. And so it's really important. It's urgent. It's imperative to just embody your best self right now. Not tomorrow, not what was in the past. Right now, in this moment. Do it. Yep. Now is what matters. That's it. That's all I got.
You can't, the past has happened. You can't change it. And the future's not guaranteed. So
bingo.
You're absolutely right. The present, being there. I love being with my kids. And if you're thinking about the past or the future, you're robbing them and you're robbing yourself of the most important thing, which is that moment. So
I agree.
On that note, this is one of our shorter episodes, but like you said, we're not trying to beat the daylights out of topics. As always, please give us a thumbs up, give us a review, send in your comments. podcast@LiftAffect.com. We appreciate you, and without you, there's no reason for us to do this. So we thank you very much. Until next time, have a great day. Stay motivated. Keep those values up. Keep realistic expectations. Keep get limit or mitigate or minimize your distractions. And seize the moment. Don't procrastinate. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the LiftAffect podcast. If you want to dive deeper into this episode and every episode, go to our website, liftaffect.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we would love it if you'd follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your support. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all with the ID Matthew McNeil. This show is brought to you by LiftAffect. a clinical mental health and consulting company that assists air carriers, corporate flight departments, pilot unions, and commercial pilots by providing comprehensive psychotherapy and mental skills coaching services to pilots with mental health and mental performance-related issues. Visit LiftAffect.com, that's LiftAffect.com, to book your free consultation. And finally, this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of counseling, psychotherapy, medicine, or any other healthcare service, including the giving of medical advice. No therapeutic or provider-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and any materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining advice for any psychological or medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the LiftAffect podcast.